Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today for meeting number 24 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. I call this meeting to order. Before we begin with our witness, you have no doubt seen that the clerk has distributed the text of a motion which results from a deal between party whips. A number of other committees have already adopted this motion. Is it the will of the committee to adopt this motion? I believe it is. As such, the motion is adopted. This brings us to the next part of our study on Clause 371, Division 19, and Clauses 380 to 385, Division 21 of Bill C-15, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on November 4th, 2025. I would now like to welcome Brian Sauvé from the National Police Federation. I would invite you to make your opening remarks.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to committee members.
The opportunity to appear today on Bill C-15. As mentioned, my name is Brian Sauvé. I'm a member of the RCMP. I'm also the president of the National Police Federation, the union representing about 20,000 members of the RCMP across Canada and internationally. I'd like to begin by expending my heartfelt thoughts to all those impacted by the tragic events in Tumbler Ridge, BC. I also want to recognize all of the members of E Division as well as now K Division who have gone into support and those who responded swiftly and decisively, demonstrating immense courage and heroism. Every day, members of the RCMP respond to calls most Canadians never have to face. They confront armed suspects, investigate child exploitation, police remote communities alone, and bear witness to the worst moments of people's lives. That service leaves a mark. Over 50% of serving members of the RCMP receive some form of a disability pension. Post-traumatic stress disorder is among the top diagnosed conditions, and psychiatric disability claims have grown over 100% in the last decade. These are not statistics. These are the men and the women who answered the call to serve and who carry the physical and psychological costs of that service. The NPF has actively sought clarity on Divisions 19 and 21 of this bill since the legislation was tabled. We have met with the Minister of Public Safety and written to the Minister of Veterans Affairs, as well as the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. While we have received some responses, critical questions remain unanswered. First, Division 21. We support Section 32.2, confirming Veterans Affairs as the decision maker for RCMP disability pension awards. This codifies existing practice and provides needed legislative clarity. However, Section 32.3 is deeply troubling. It authorizes the Minister of Veterans Affairs, the Minister of Public Safety, and the Commissioner of the RCMP to disclose and share information to one another for the purposes of this part, and further allows Veterans Affairs Canada to share information with the RCMP for administration and management of the force. These authorities are drafted broadly, contain no limiting definitions, and include no privacy safeguards. In a letter to the Privacy Commissioner, the Privacy Commissioner confirmed that the Privacy Act still applies. But that is cold comfort to a member suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder who discovers their medical information was shared beyond what was necessary and must navigate a complaint process as a discharged civilian without resources, without support, and without evidence of what occurred behind closed doors. Today, under an existing MOU, sharing is limited and one-directional. RCMP RCMP Health Services provides medical information to Veterans Affairs Canada for adjudication, and only the determination, diagnosis, name, and regimental number flow back. The Minister of Public Safety recently outlined to us that the intent is to codify the existing MOU and not to expand it. If that is the intent, then codify it. Define the limits in legislation. Do not leave members guessing whether seeking help will cost them their career. Second, Division 19. Bill C-15 replaces the long-standing pension indexation formula for RCMP disability benefits with a CPI-only model, effective January 1st, 2027. The budget estimates that this saves $5.8 billion over 4 years. That is $5.8 billion taken from injured members of the RCMP. When Canadian Armed Forces members transitioned to CPI-only indexation under the Veterans Wellbeing Act in 2006, existing recipients were grandfathered under the previous formula. RCMP members are not afforded such protections under this legislation. Every recipient, including those receiving benefits for decades, moves to the new formula overnight. The legislation also permits regulations with retroactive effect. We have been told this will not be used. If so, why is it in the bill? And its presence creates uncertainty for our members planning for their financial futures. We're not asking for special treatment. We're only asking for fairness. They ask that the benefits promised when they pinned on the badge be recognized. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Merci, Monsieur Sauvé, pour...
Thank you, Mr. Sauvé, for your opening remarks. I will now give the floor to members, starting with Mr. Gill.
For being here today. We truly appreciate it. And I would like to begin by offering my sincere condolences to the victims and the families following the tragic shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. Our thoughts are also with the entire community during this undoubtedly incredible, difficult time. I also want to recognize the first responders who acted quickly and very courageously during this tragedy. As the president of the National Police Federation, I know you take great pride in your members that you represent, and you should rightly so. I would like to ask you please convey this committee's appreciation and gratitude to those officers and the first responders. How can this committee and body of Parliament help ensure that the first responders and RCMP members who responded in Tumbler Ridge have the supports that they need? Is there anything that we can do from our side to make sure that the first responders are supported?
I think you're doing it. Public support is appreciated. I know I spoke to our director, Jeff Swan, who is actually on the ground in Tumbler Ridge, has been since last night, and he has expressed to me that the membership there, as well as the community, are feeling the love, for lack of a better term, whether it be from the federal government or different provincial governments or even internationally. So I think continued conveyance of that message as that community grieves and works through this tragedy, I think would be much appreciated.
Well, thank you for that. And we know throughout the House, all members are deeply grateful for the service of the RCMP and all members that served in that community as well. And it's moments like these that remind us of the sacrifices made by the ones that wear the uniform and the importance of ensuring that they have the support that they deserve. So once again, from the entire committee and the entire body of Parliament, we want to thank you as well. And I'll get into my first line of questioning here. Months ago, the Liberal government committed to the budget of 2025 of hiring 1,000 new RCMP officers to addressing the growth of public safety challenges. To your knowledge, do you have those 1,000 officers, do you know if those 1,000 officers have been hired till this date?
far as I am under the understanding is the funding for that hasn't been approved yet. That's one of the things we're talking about here today.
Okay.
However, work is well underway, yes, with the RCMP to expedite their recruitment process, and the spots are available at the training academy in Regina to be able to accommodate an increased number of cadets.
Would you be able to provide me with a timeline of when these officers might be recruited, trained, and deployed?
That's a question best asked of the RCMP. From my understanding, the plan for the RCMP with this next fiscal year is up to 50, if not 55 troops of cadets, compared to their existing this year 40. And a troop is 32, so 40 is almost 1,300. Going up to 50 obviously brings that over 1,800. And then if they do 55, then you would have another 150 on top of that.
Okay. I would like to go to my next question. I know you mentioned that your members have serious concerns with parts of the budget of 2025 with Bill C-15, particularly around the financial security, disability benefits, medical privacy, and the trust in the federal system. How do these concerns affect morale and retention among current members?
I don't know if it would have an impact on retention from a member's perspective. From an organization's perspective, our concern is misapplication of medical information shared from Veterans Affairs that could lead an organization such as the RCMP to make rash decisions with respect to fitness for duty, leading to an unreasonable or early medical discharge. So the retention from the RCMP side, they might be discharging more that based on erroneous information. From a morale perspective, the membership are, the best way to put this is, personally, I have trust issues. I think our membership also have trust issues with the RCMP being able to equally and fairly implement health services and occupational health services. So that's probably from the morale perspective. They're worried about not being treated fairly or equitably through the RCMP system.
So then I would like to ask, given that if the government does manage to hire 1,000 new officers, could the changes in Bill C-15 and recruitment potentially worsen the staffing challenges that the force is already feeling?
It could lead to a greater issue with retirements and resignations, if you will, yes.
Okay, and I want to finish off with a fairly simple question, but I know you might get a little lengthier in this, but if Parliament wanted to improve recruitment and retention, what amendments to Bill C-15 would you recommend, and what strategies would you put forth to encourage young Canadians to join the RCMP while keeping experienced officers also motivated and still staying in the force?
About 15 seconds, Mr. Sauvé.
Well, I think a lot of things are being done right already. So, for example, the cadet training allowance is almost doubling. We will probably see an increase in interest in applicants to the RCMP over the next year. As far as retention goes, I think treating people with fairness in what already exists. So your diagnosis, your benefits, your medical information is with the provider of that benefit, meaning Veterans Affairs, not necessarily with your employer.
Thank you very much. Madame McCann, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome again, Mr. Sauvé. We are all heartbroken by the devastating tragedy in Tumbler Ridge, BC, and our thoughts are with the victims, the injured, and everyone is affected, as my colleague, Mr. Gill, stated in his opening. And violence has no place in our communities, and as the RCMP continues its investigation, Canadians are standing by our neighbors at the Tumbler Ridge in solidarity and in support. I also would like to thank once again to our first responders, our brave first responders who were at the scene and helping the victims and families. My question will be on the budget 2025 and how it provides additional expenditures of $184 million over 4 years to retain temporary staff who were originally hired to address backlogs in the processing of disability claims, with Division 21 confirming Veteran Affairs Canada as the decision maker for the RCMP disability pension awards. So it is important to understand how these investments will affect delivery of services, and will this investment and clarity provided help to reduce the disability claims backlog and improve timely, consistent decision making for RCMP members? Would you make a comment on that? If you see any value of these investments and how it will be provided for the help?
I do. There is a backlog with Veterans Affairs for application and adjudication and communication of whatever the decision is to the applicant. So whatever we can do collectively to improve that service delivery, I think, is a benefit to our members and also a benefit to other clients of Veterans Affairs Canada. And that's a positive.
Thank you. So Division 21 of the bill establishes new conditions under the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Superannuation Act, which personal information may be disclosed to handle compensation claims. Given the sensitivity of the data, could you please speak to the safeguards in place that will ensure that RCMP members' information continues to be protected when it's shared across the departments?
Well, that's my concern, and that's my largest concern with this piece of legislation is the way I see it and the way we've read it, there are no protections being placed in the legislation. And for context, for example, Veterans Affairs is where a member applies for a disability benefit. They reach out to the RCMP to receive information such as an injury report that happened in a police car crash, which is shared with Veterans Affairs to assist in the determination of that injury or disability application. Veterans Affairs makes their adjudication and provides a response to the member, and then shares back with the RCMP the name, the regimental number, the diagnosis, and the determination. They don't share any of the information that is provided by the member to make that determination, any of the application information or the percentage of disability, for example. Veterans Affairs Canada operates on a table of disabilities. You can have a 25% disability for post-traumatic stress disorder and 20% for hearing loss. Someone at the RCMP could infer that you are 45% disabled because you have a 25 and a 20, which is not true at all. And the fear is that by sharing that information, we end up in a world where the employer, the RCMP, is saying you are no longer fit to be a police officer. Therefore, off you go, versus keep getting treatment and getting care and having access to that care. So the worry is the oversharing of information without protections in place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sauvé. So, as stated in the budget, and as my colleague, Mr. Gill, also asked you about the 1,000 RCMP officers and additionally 1,000 CBSA officers that will be hired throughout this year if the budget is approved. My experience is like with the RCMP, because I go out with the police frequently to understand better. I recently had the privilege also of visiting Cornwall Point of Entry, and where I saw firsthand the important work that the RCMP and CBSA working together and what they are doing to curb smuggling. This committee has heard testimonies about the need for consistent funding to support our frontline RCMP officers and how much investment strengthen the agency's operational capacity. With that in mind, the budget 2025 represents a meaningful first step towards providing our federal law enforcement agencies with the resources and supports that they need. Could you please a little bit extend the answer that you give to Mr. Gill as well, and speak on how these investments, like the cadet recruitment allowance, are the first steps towards enhancing officer capacity to detect, disrupt, and ultimately stop criminal activity, especially sensitive areas like Cornwall.
Again, in about 15 minutes.
Minutes.
Okay.
Dans 20 secondes peut-être, I can clarify.
Maybe 20 seconds?
1,000 new personnel, which I think should be 1,000 new police officers, is over a 3-year period. Right? It's not an immediate in the first year. The cadet training allowance had not been increased since in 18 years, so it's a welcome increase for those who are leaving their families for 6 months in Regina to have $1,000 a week versus $500 a week. All of those are good moves in the right direction to accomplish the goal of increased border security, increased frontline capacity, increased proceeds of crime investigations, cybersecurity, all of that great stuff.
Very good. Thank you so much. Madame de Bellefeuille, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci. Ms. de Bellefeuille, you have the floor. 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sauvé, first, I would like you to note that we are looking at a few clauses of C-15, but you will know that the bill contains almost 600 clauses on any number of topics. Today, we are only focused on a few of them that focus on the Pensions Act, thus the pensions for members of the RCMP and other members. I heard in a brief that prior to 2016, there were civilians, and they could also be impacted if the clauses are adopted as such. The disability benefits that they had before 2016 could be impacted. That means for these people, their lives would change because they would see their pensions cut back. Could you comment on this? Certainly. We still have civilian members in the RCMP. That said, we have not hired new civilian members since 2016. I think we have about 2,400. I'm not sure of the exact number. But they are in the same pension system as other RCMP members. As such, all of the changes we are discussing today will impact not just regular RCMP members, but also civilian members.
See, for the officers, for management, which...
Oui. Non, j'ai parlé avec des agents de la GRC. Moi, j'ai un...
I spoke with some RCMP officers. There's a contingent based in Valleyfield. Of course, given that this riding is in the south of Quebec, they focus a great deal on border security. And it looks like managers, regular officers, everyone is in the same boat. Everyone will be negatively impacted by these changes to pensions, especially officers with disabilities and seniors, because people who already receive disability benefits, people who have had to leave their job because they can't do it anymore, planned out their finances based on a certain sustainable income. And these changes will make it so January 1st, overnight, they will be receiving less benefit income. Have I understood correctly? It's not really that it will go down on January 1st. It's that future indexing will change. Pensions will be indexed solely to the CPI instead of the CPI and the federal wage growth formula. Thus, increases on a year-over-year basis may be decreased. But that's just it. If someone is disabled and if it's had to drop out of the force, that person might be expecting a 2.5% year-over-year increase. And then they might end up receiving, due to these changes, just a 0.5% year-over-year increase. That's a big change for someone who is expecting a predictable income. It seems like the rules are being changed for people who are receiving disability benefits. I do not understand the reasoning behind this. I don't know why the government is making this change. except for the fact that they might be wanting to save money at the expense of officers with disabilities. They mentioned savings of $5.8 billion over 4 years. It seems like 5.8 or $5 billion is the same number as the cost overruns for an old age security program. I think that's an interesting coincidence. And you also spoke about information sharing. You spoke about this in English, but now I would like you to talk about it in French. You said if someone becomes disabled, the RCMP would do an analysis, provide some information to Veterans Affairs. Veterans Affairs would make an adjudication and assess a certain disability percentage, and then they would give the information back. We are not talking about broad sharing of information here. It would seem that the government is trying to meddle in this system. Do you have any sense of what the government is hoping to do by expanding the scope of information sharing? I don't understand the logic behind this provision. I am also confused. I do have my suspicions. Your guesses, you are saying. Yes, my suspicion is that the Occupational Health and Safety Division at the RCMP is not necessarily in tune with the idea of a disability. Maybe I have post-traumatic stress disorder. The division might want to create fences around me to make sure that I am not further traumatized. But these fences should instead come from a psychologist and psychological treatment. A psychologist would be working with me to tell me how I should work with my PTSD. So then they discover that, Ms. de Belfoy, I'm sorry to cut you off. It breaks my heart, really, but I do need to give the floor to Mr. Au. 5 minutes.
Thank you. So once again, thank you, Mr. Sauvé, for coming to make your presentation. I echo what's been said by my colleagues. Our heart is with the community in Tumbling Ridge, and also we would like to convey our thanks to the first responders, including the RCMP officers. It's really impressive that, as being reported, the RCMP officers arrived in 2 minutes. And I can also imagine the kind of, when they arrive and then and when they saw what is happening, I think that could be some kind of shock, and some kind of difficult experience for them. Now, as a person with a background in mental health service, I am concerned about what you said in the opening remarks, saying that about 50% of officers in the police force received some kind of disability benefits or allowance. I mean, to me, I think this is a very large number. But the question I want to ask is that, have you seen an increase, or, it has always been the case like that? It's quite a stable number, or, there's some kind of changes over time?
For disability benefit applications, early in my service, about, when I started 20 plus years ago, the membership of the RCMP, and I will say Veterans Affairs Canada, is a victim of its own success. The membership of the RCMP were probably not broadly aware of the benefits available to them through Veterans Affairs Canada. And about 12 years ago, they went on a marketing campaign in partnership with the RCMP. You saw the development of online, the MyVac account, the dedicated liaison officer from the RCMP with Veterans Affairs doing educational symposiums. And of course, when people become aware that, hey, I can apply for benefits. And at the same time, this government, or actually successive governments, regardless of stripe, have gone on reducing stigma and increasing awareness of mental health injuries, and it's okay to not be okay, Bell Let's Talk Day. All of those things have been happening in concert. So whether you're a member of the RCMP or a municipal police service, the stigma has been breaking down to come forward with whatever the injury might be. And here we are today seeing a lot of growth in post-traumatic stress, as well as hearing loss, tinnitus, all sorts of different benefit applications. It has increased, but I think that's being a victim of their own success and other things that have been happening in society as a whole.
As in that regard is that I remember in the previous meeting you mentioned that your organization indicate that about $8 million investment in proactive mental health will support and generate up to $15 million saving. If this is going to be implemented. So, are you still standing by the numbers?
I do. That was, I believe, in our federal budget submission from last fall, and there has been a lot of work done through the RCMP and the University of Regina, or SIPCERT, about what's called the mental health model. It is about giving cadets, as they go through training in the first number of years of their career, the ability to learn what mechanisms and what they can do in their day-to-day life to be more resilient. And Dr. Carlton at the University of Regina will tell you that the RCMP hires extremely psychologically healthy people beyond the average of the Canadian populace, and this mental health model is now available to be expanded to the entirety of the RCMP population. In addition, we have adopted and modified somewhat the world-class reintegration program from the Edmonton Police Service, which is peer-led. So if I'm involved in a member-involved shooting, so for example, the members in Tumbler Ridge might now have a fear of going into a school. How do we reintegrate them slowly from a peer-led perspective to be fully operational and not be afraid of schools, right? And that has been shown great success, almost 90, I think 86% success of every member who's gone through that program has been returned operational. So the mental health model is one thing, the tools to be more resilient, and the reintegration program is those who have experienced some form of psychologically traumatic incident and there's a barrier to being operational. That program can be available to bring them back to work.
Good, thank you. Now going back to
Sorry, MP, I need to I'm sorry to interrupt. That leads us to MP Pulaski, who is on the screen. MP Pulaski.
Yeah, I hope now my microphone's functioning okay.
Yes, I think it does.
Okay, Mr. Sauvé, we've spoken many times, and you know what I'm going to talk about. It's getting my RCMP for Thunder Bay, which they've been trying, but there's just not enough new people coming out, and when they do come out, they seem to end up going into in contract policing, or where you have a contract with forces like on the prairies. I know there are measures in this budget which would hopefully improve our ability to recruit new people, and the extra money for cadets, 1,000 new officers. Now you said it's going to be 300, over 1,000 over 3 years. When can we expect to have more boots on the ground?
So as a full complement, I think, we have more boots on the ground almost daily. Weekly, we have troops graduating from depot in Regina. Now, as far as federal policing, I continue to pressure the commissioner about our serving members in contract policing who have identified a career desire to move into a federal policing role, whether it be in Thunder Bay or whether it be in Sault Ste. Marie or whether it be in Windsor, that they be released, and the ability for them to transfer and move on with their careers should be moved forward. Because as we went through the COVID pandemic and depot had to shut down, which caused a challenge for turning out, and it's almost a year and a half challenge to getting back up to capacity. Divisions in the contract world were holding on to their resources and not allowing them to transfer out because there weren't enough coming in to replace them from depot. We're at a place now where that argument doesn't hold water in my world anymore. So if you want, as a member of the RCMP, to leave La Loche, Saskatchewan and move into Thunder Bay, then you should be allowed to do so.
So maybe you could explain why is that still happening? And I take it then the police themselves would like to have that ability, so they do want to go to federal policing, and why do they want to switch over to federal policing?
Well, I think it depends on any member's career progression. You know, some love uniform and will do uniform for life. Some want to do it for a certain period of time and move into proceeds of crime or move into VIP protection or border security or national security. And I think some of the challenges, the competing pressures that we saw coming out of the challenges with recruiting and training through COVID is we saw a reinvestment or an increase investment from different provinces and jurisdictions into their provincial police services agreement. So, for example, the province of British Columbia invested $230 million, which we're very thankful for, to fill previously frozen positions in the province of BC. The province of Saskatchewan authorized filling that province up to the annex in their contract. You know, the province of Nova Scotia, similarly. So there were all these competing competing demands for every cadet that was graduating out of depot. And unfortunately, up until now, federal policing has been on the back burner. And I'm glad to see it's now on the front burner.
So has it changed? Because from what you said, it could be the individual jurisdictions would deny their officers' requests to transfer to federal policing, but you're saying now that has been changed?
I'm saying it's my perspective that the argument of holding someone back in La Loche, Saskatchewan or Airdrie, Alberta shouldn't hold water anymore because there are enough cadets who are going to depot and graduating depot, so they should be allowed to transition to their new roles if they've identified federal policing as a role they'd like to go into.
Now, is this a policy of the RCMP that they give the power to the individual jurisdiction to be able to restrict their officers leaving?
Well, it's the commanding officer of the division, right, who obviously has control over their manpower and how they deliver under their provincial police service agreement or municipal police service agreement or municipal police unit agreement, depending on the province or the jurisdiction.
So wouldn't RCMP command be able to override that and make it a rule and say, no, the individual commanders cannot restrict their people moving to other positions?
Oh, well, that's a good question for the commissioner.
And that is that's bad because we now have to move to a different MP, and in this case it will be Madame de Bellefeuille pour 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. de Bellefeuille, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. So, right now, we are debating or questioning certain clauses in Bill C-15. We know that the government has increased the pension for seniors over 75 by 10%. They made no such increase for seniors 65 to 75, thus creating 2 classes of seniors. Do you think that similar inequalities will be created between veterans and RCMP officers when it comes to pensions? Because my understanding of the bill is that it does not impact veterans. It will only impact RCMP officers, even though you fall under the same set of rules, as I understand it. Have I understood correctly? Yes. In fact, there will be 3 classes of veterans in the future. There will be RCMP officers post-2006, veterans pre-06, veterans post-06, so 3 classes. the RCMP will be joining the post-2006 veterans. I'm trying to understand this. The government is supposed to look after the collective good of its people. And for that reason, I don't understand why it's trying to create divisions between veterans and RCMP officers when it comes to their pensions. Do you have any ideas about why today we are talking about legislation that would change the lives of RCMP officers in this way? I just don't get it. Can you give me your theories? Is it just out of a desire to save money? My theory is...
Comme on se parle, la suggestion que j'ai mis là.
In my opening remarks, I suggested a grandfathering clause for people who are already receiving disability benefits. Then the new rules could only be applied to new pensioners. Do you have any ideas of amendments? Because we have to report back to the government and also send our recommendations to the Finance Committee. Are you recommending a grandfather clause? That's it, yes. We spoke about it this morning. We would be happy to make recommendations like that one for your consideration. Thank you, Ms. de Bellefeuille. Sorry to cut you off again. We will move over to MP Lloyd. 5 minutes.
Mr. Sauvé, as I said, for the members that put themselves into harm's way to protect our communities in Tumbler Ridge and everywhere across the country, our thoughts are with those members and their families. I wanted you to talk more about what your privacy concerns were in regards to the legislation that we're talking about today. Can you elaborate on that?
I can, and for those who are not aware, Veterans Affairs Canada is considered to be the WSIB, if you will, for the membership of the RCMP. And if you're talking about a workers' compensation regime for a municipal or a provincial police officer, it's a separate government agency, right? WSIB Ontario is not the OPP. So I make an application to WSIB Ontario. They may seek information from my employer to confirm the police car accident or whatever, but they're not necessarily going to share back medical information to my employer. So that is the trend in the world. And what we see here, the fear is that Veterans Affairs Canada is going to allow the sharing of personal medical information, whether it be the percentage of disability, whether it be the treatment reports from psychologists, whether it be medication that's been prescribed, whether it be prognoses or diagnoses of betterment back to the RCMP, which could then by the RCMP be used in an occupational setting to make determinations on a member's future as a police officer. It would be.
I want to quote, are you familiar, there was a recent article this week where the Minister of Public Safety committed to maintaining the RCMP's current structure of contract policing for those provinces that wanted to continue with it. Although there are concerns about the funding being provided to the RCMP to fulfill its federal policing mandate and its many mandates. With current funding levels and projected funding levels, are you confident that the RCMP can carry on all of these duties effectively?
Well, I think we have to establish that we're moving in the right direction. So, if I've spoken about the 1,000 new personnel, which I think should all be police officers or sworn members of the RCMP. That's a move in the right direction. Is it enough? No. And we will continue to advocate for more. You go back to the Senate report on the RCMP, or even our report that we did last year, we probably should have 3,000 more to effectively do what we do. So it's a step in the right direction, and we'll continue to press for better.
And with my remaining time, can you elaborate more on the proposed changes to the RCMP disability pension?
Which one? So the sharing of medical information is one. The indexation, the proposal, is the second.
The proposal on the indexation.
It's my understanding, and the way I read this, that currently indexation decisions annually on those who receive a disability pension is done based on two formulas, the greater of two, either the CPI index or the federal wage growth formula, whichever is higher, annually is applied. And the proposal here is that effective January 1st next year, only CPI would apply to all. Even those who are already retired and in receipt of a Veterans Affairs disability benefit. And that could impact future wage growth or future pension growth over time.
Now, apologies for not researching this myself, but over the past 5 years, which one has grown at a greater level, the wages or the CPI?
I believe they've used the federal wage growth formula 6 times in the last 20 years.
Okay, so it's not the most often used, but no. It can be quite significant when there is a gap, isn't that true?
It can be, yes.
Okay, and so you're concerned your members will be left behind by using the CPI-only formula?
Our members, as well as their retired members, as well as their spouses who receive death benefits once a retired member passes.
Do you have thoughts on why the government would put a retroactivity clause in there? They said that they're not going to use it, but what are your thoughts on why that would be included?
As I mentioned earlier, I have trust issues. I am a police officer. I think most police officers do, and we are suspicious by nature. So I'm not sure why they would put that in there, but there is who knows what the motives are.
Thank you, MP Lloyd. MP McDonald, for 5 minutes, please.
I'll cede to
MP
Ramsey.
Okay, thank you. MP Ramsey.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Mr. Sauvé, what is the last year in which the federal wage growth formula was used, to the best of your knowledge? You're saying, so pensions, what's the last year they were indexed to the federal wage growth formula rather than the consumer price index? Oh, I'm not sure of the exact year. It's been a while, though, right? In recent years, it's been indexed to the consumer price index, unless I'm mistaken. I'm not exactly sure of the year. I'm almost certain that it was 6 times in the last 25 years, yes. I understood that veterans have a split regime. Could you confirm this? Aside from veterans, is the Federation aware of other categories of employees with a split indexation regime? Well, we have regular RCMP members and civilian members of the RCMP. Then some retired RCMP officers already receive benefits. But outside the RCMP, are there categories of employees who have this same split indexation regime? No, because they are covered by the Government Employees Compensation Act. As such, there is workers' compensation provided to them by the provinces and territories. You referred to a pre-2006, post-2006 split for veterans. Should I understand that pre-2006, some people were able to access indexation based on the wage growth formula, and post-2006 they weren't? That's my understanding as well. Pre-2006, all veterans receiving disability benefits had access to both formulas, and they were grandfathered in. For veterans post-2006, they could only access the CPI indexation. Okay. I'm an RCMP officer. I have depression. I would normally go to see my doctor. would I then be taken off my duties? Would the occupational health office ask to be involved? What would their involvement be? Or rather, would this whole thing be managed by my doctor, who would make it into a disability application 3 years down the road? I'm just trying to figure out the roles of each person in the chain. I'm going to respond in English.
So if a member is facing depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, or those symptoms, they can seek treatment through a psychologist for diagnosis and help. That is under the supplemental benefits regime that already exists for our members. Up to 6 sessions with a psychologist. Then a report is submitted to the RCMP talking about the progress that's had in those 6 sessions and asks for an additional 6 sessions where a member can then go back to see a psychologist. And all of that plays to the diagnosis. If there's a diagnosis, then that would be used in the Veterans Affairs process, not necessarily with the RCMP to seek further psychological care. And should that member be on sick leave, then reporting to the RCMP Health Services on a regular basis, usually every 30 days, with the prognosis and a return to work date is required.
So let's say, and you can answer in English, say I become disabled. You don't think my employer should have the right to know the details. Are there situations where it could be justified for the employer to understand? I know there's a risk there for the employee and for other employees. What about extreme situations? It depends.
For example, the RCMP has what's called a salary continuance sick leave model because we have no short-term disability insurance plan, and we only have a long-term disability insurance plan that you can access by discharging from your job. So we have a salary continuance model, which means a shared responsibility between the member, the employee, and the employer. So if I'm suffering from brain cancer, for example, the RCMP keeps the salary taps turned on while I seek treatment. They help me with treatment, and then I get back into my work. If I'm suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, or alcoholism, right, the RCMP keeps the salary taps turned on while I seek treatment. Sometimes that might be a 6 to 8 week inpatient treatment in order to get back to work. And those things are definitely something that the RCMP is made aware of to assess a fitness for duty. However, the information that I provide through my psychologist that would be perhaps shared with Veterans Affairs to make a disability assessment is a little more in depth than just what's provided to my employer for fitness for duty. And that's the worry, is the sharing between the disability pension provider and assessment and the employer.
Thank you. I left a little more time because I thought everyone was quite interested in your compact and content intense answer, which brings me to you, MP Mantle. Welcome to the committee for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy to be here. Thank you, Mr. Sauvé, for attending, providing your valuable testimony, including on proper resourcing for the RCMP. I want to ask you about resourcing at the border. That was a topic of much discussion several months ago. It's perhaps died down a little bit. At the time, the government spent, I think, about $5 million to lease 2 American Black Hawk helicopters. Do you think that was a wise use of funds for securing the border?
I think it accomplished the goal at the time. And from my perspective, we have written to the Commissioner. We think that, obviously, those pilots and those assets of the RCMP should be within our bargaining unit. They should have the same training as our members. They're flying them around. So what is the plan to internalize that, if that is the continued way forward?
You said you thought it achieved the objective. What do you think the objective was?
Well, at the time, obviously, it was an immediate response to ensure safety of the border, and leasing those particular helicopters was a fairly quick ability and a quick chance to work around procurement, which is an entire other topic.
Did it make the border safer, in your opinion?
I think I've seen them flying around my place. I'm in the Swanton sector. I know that some folks in Manitoba have expressed satisfaction seeing it. I know folks in the lower mainland of British Columbia through to Alberta have expressed satisfaction. Has it made the border safer? It is becoming another tool. More tools are always better, you know, whether it's a drone or whether it's a helicopter that can relay information to the units on the ground. Those tools are always welcome.
And has the government indicated that it will make those tools part of the RCMP, or are you still waiting to understand if these will be contracted out and not within the RCMP?
I think if I read between the lines, I'm hopeful that that will become some form of a fixed asset for the RCMP in due time, right? The procurement challenges still exist.
Thank you for that. In some of your submissions to the government, you had requested that the Privacy Commissioner be consulted. Did the government accept that request? Did the government consult the Privacy Commissioner on your concerns?
Well, we just went straight to the Privacy Commissioner ourselves. So I hope that the Privacy Commissioner and the government have those discussions, because we just started discussions with the Privacy Commissioner on our own.
So you've not heard from the government whether they will engage on your concern on that issue?
No, we have not, no.
Okay. I assume you would reiterate your request to the government to work with the Privacy Commissioner on these concerns?
I would.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Mantle, and we'll finish with MP McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Mr. Sauvé for being a witness here today. Just like to echo my thoughts and prayers to the community of Tumbler Ridge as well, and to the first responders who were in a very difficult situation. I come from Atlantic Canada and remember the devastating day at Portapique. So I know that the response time was amazing, and truly impressed by that. Those RCMP officers that put their lives in the line, without question. I just wanted to comment around budget 2025 release. I know there was some confusion about whether the adjudication of the RCMP officers was going to continue under VAC. I'm pleased to see that that's been clarified. I actually had probably some of your membership reach out to my office and try to get clarification. So I'm glad that that component has been clarified. I guess I would just further add, in regards to consumer price indexing, you know, in your previous comments, you would like to maintain the combination of salary growth or CPI, whichever is the higher. Do you not feel that the CPI is more closely aligned with the cost of living expenses as they go up?
I think it depends. And yes, CPI is aligned with the cost of living expenses, but the way the formula is used right now is it's the greater of the two. So even if CPI is aligned with cost of living expenses and the federal wage growth formula is 0.5% higher, then the federal wage growth formula is the one that is used, which would exceed the cost of living expenses in that year.
So the disability benefits that we're referring to are disability benefits for officers that obviously are on disability. They're not serving.
No, they are.
They're still serving.
A combination of both, right? So you can be a serving member in receipt of a disability pension. So for example, I might be in a foot pursuit and jump off a set of stairs and break my ankle, make a full recovery, but now my ankle gets really sore in the cold. Even though I'm fully operational, I can have a disability pension award for that sore ankle, which carries on into retirement.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. Just kind of pivoting to something else. Just calling on your experience to speak to recruitment and retention in the RCMP. We've heard discussions about the 1,000 officers getting hired. In my community, as I speak with RCMP officers that's served a long time, there has to be a better job of recruitment and retention done in their minds, because it's an aging police force, just like an aging population. Do you have any suggestions for government on that line?
It's funny, you're almost taking words out of my mouth for the next discussion I'm going to have with the commissioner, because we, and just demographically speaking, within the RCMP in 2006 to 2008, we went on a very similar recruiting push where there were 2 troops a week, in some instances graduating from depot. So if you do the math, that's 20 to 21 years ago. And the life of a police officer in the RCMP now is about 27 years, give or take. So are we thinking about 2 troops a week retiring in 6 to 7 years or 5 to 6 years, and what is that going to do to our attrition in the future? So we still need to keep our foot on the gas pedal, if you will, over the next decade in recruitment, so that we can impact what might come as attrition.
Another point that I've come across is there's a lot of challenges with policing where they go into a mental health issue in a First Nation environment. Yeah. Now, we've had some success in having First Nation police officers working with the RCMP. Obviously, you see benefit in that we have to do a better job of recruiting First Nation officers to work in their communities.
We do, and I would encourage the government to expedite or restart its review of the First Nations Indigenous Policing Program to make those services an essential service, which will allow them consistency in recruiting, predictability in budgets, which allows for sustained staffing levels and the ability to be able to integrate with other police services and jurisdictions.
Thank you, MP McDonald. So thank you, Mr. Sauvé, for this presentation, for all the work that you put into it. On va se rencontrer à nouveau le 24.
Our next meeting will be on February 24th. There we will continue our study on C8. Until then, have a great break week. Ms. de Bellefeuille, I just have a question about our recommendations. How will we convey our recommendations to the Finance Committee? We still have to hear from the minister. Do we have a new date for that? After all, we do have a deadline. Can you clarify a little bit how we will be providing our recommendations to the Finance Committee and the Minister of Public Safety? It's a good question, but I have to disappoint you. I don't exactly know how we will be proceeding. I will need to coordinate with the clerk, the minister's team, of course. So we will work together with the various parties around the table to get an answer for you. But it's a very legitimate question you have asked. So thank you. Have a good rest of your day and a good break week.